Welcome one, welcome all to the very first episode of Everyday Lives, Passionate People. Have you ever looked at someone and wondered, what is their story? What shaped them? What broke them? And what kept them going? Well, I'm your show host, Dante Patterson, and boy, do I have the show for you. We move through life surrounded by people we may never fully know. The stranger on the street, the person across the room, the mentor we admire, the friend we thought we understood. Each one carries a world of memories, dreams, pain, joy, and purpose. I'm Dante Patterson, and I'm searching for the stories hidden inside everyday life. This is Everyday Lives, Passionate People. So before I talk about myself, I want to talk about what this podcast is and why it exists. So I am curious about people and their stories, and I want to talk about why these stories matter. And because of these important stories, I want to slow down and ask those questions. Not only the surface level questions, but the deeper questions that we don't hear often. But why am I doing this now? Well, think about it. We are in a new world where everything is changing by the hour, by the day. And because this world is changing so much, we are changing so much. I realize that when we walk past people we see on the street, we only see the surface. We hear someone's title, their status, their roles, or their attitudes and achievements. But do we ever get that full story? The person behind that fancy role? So this podcast is about everyday people, in case you didn't hear. It's about everyday people and the stories that shape them. My mission is to bring together guests that are leaders, artists, educators, students, family members, or honestly, someone who's just trying to figure it out. Because I'm not doing this for the fame or any of the publicity. I am doing this for the humility because I believe there's more than meets the eye. I want to talk about personal lives, not just achievements. And when I do bring guests on the show, I want them to have a passion, a story, or something that they can share with others, like a lesson. I want to induce connection, not perfection. And I want those conversations that are human and reflective, but most of all, just these conversations that are real. So each episode, I plan to sit down with someone and ask them about their life, questions, challenges that they've overcome, and possible themes I hope to explore involve identity, passion, failure, love, leadership, growth, joy, faith, and even personal values. Again, I want to sit down with the guests and I want to ask who they are beyond the surface. I want to ask what they care about and what shaped them, what they've learned, and challenges that have made them struggle, and even what have kept them going. I hope to have episodes that are funny, some that are more emotional, and some that are just reflective. I want you to expect real conversations, not fake motivation. If you're thinking it's going to be a podcast where I'm going to bring in someone to help get you rich in a week, bad news. This is not the podcast for you. The takeaway here is that everyone has something to teach us, and it doesn't matter how old they are, how young they are, what they do, or even the things that they've learned. Every conversation is rooted in everyone has a story. Speaking of stories, I hope to have a signature question to ask the guest on my show. And that question revolves around, what is one part of your story that no one would know just by looking at you? So why does this question matter? And think about it. When was the last time you were asked a question of that depth? Has it been a while? If so, that's probably the reason why you're listening to this show. because I believe that when we have those stories that aren't shared often, those stories carry pain and passion, experiences that are quiet and we don't know much about it. And I bet you have a coworker, a friend, or a student or someone you're coaching or mentoring. I bet they have overcome so many things that you may not even know about. I want to invite honesty without forcing someone to overshare. So you all may have noticed that it's my first episode and I don't have a guest. Well, again, it's my first episode, but that's really because before you meet any of my guests, you need to know who I am and what I'm about. So my story is that I was born and raised in Pulaski, Virginia, and I lived there for about 12 years. Then my family moved to Spokane, Washington, all the way across the US. And that was about 3 years. Then we moved to Peoria, Illinois. We were there for about 4-5 years. During that time, I finished high school and I started college. Then my family in 2022 moved back to Virginia, but this time in Fairfax. But I still stayed in Illinois to finish up my education. But then I'm actually currently in Indiana because I'm doing an internship. So just off my resume, I graduated high school in 2020. And if you know, that was a pretty crazy time. I graduated with my bachelor's in music education in 2025. And currently, I'm getting my master's in higher education student affairs. I also have an assistantship with my college, working in residence life. I just told you a lot of stuff. And frankly, this is the same exact thing I would tell someone if I met them at a conference, if I have a new coworker, because that is the surface of me. I would also tell people I'm a supervisor, an advisor, an educator, an assistant complex director, a leader, or even a practitioner, and it goes on. On a resume, this can all look impressive, but right here in this podcast, none of that matters. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to answer this question again, but this time I'm going to look beyond that. I'm going to go beyond the surface. So I love joy and I love how complex people can be. I have a deep passion for leadership, mentoring, and coaching others. And one of my favorite TV shows of all time is Ted Lasso. And it's so funny because the first time I watched it, I loved it. And I just thought it was some cute sports feel-good show, which it was. And then I watched it again and I was like, I really love Ted Lasso and the leadership behind it. So I watched it again, but this time I paid more attention. I did a deep dive into it of all the characters, how they learn, how they grow, the mistakes they made. And gosh, I've never loved a show this much before. And I love the show so much. I researched all the leadership and I made an entire conference presentation about the leadership in Ted Lasso because I love it that much. I love understanding how people work and how people think. And because of my background in education, I have one philosophy, or I have many philosophies, but this is one of them. I believe that everyone has room to grow, no matter how old they are, how young they are, and what they're doing. And because of that, it ties into this next thing. I'm still figuring out life, right? So the next thing I want to talk about is why I'm so drawn to people's stories. I think stories help us understand people beyond their assumptions. I believe these stories create empathy because when I create this space, we're sitting down together and we're diving into what happened, what did they learn, what are they becoming. We learn from these experiences. And I think powerful wisdom can come from everyday and ordinary conversations. So one of my hopes for all of you is to walk away more curious about the people around you and even more reflective of their own stories. I promise to induce honest and thoughtful conversations with people that induce humor, emotion, and reflection. I want people to feel safe while being real. Guys, I gotta be honest. I'm not a podcast expert. I mean, this is only my first episode. I'm still learning to ask better questions, be a better host, and frankly, listening deeply. I want to learn how people turn their passions into their purpose, and how they turn those lowest moments into incredible comebacks. So I just want to recap what I've talked about so far. So this podcast is about everyday people that we see on the streets. It isn't about what they do, the job they do. It's about everyday people. This is about real stories. This is about passion, a story of struggles and growth. I want to thank you all for listening today, because I think this is only the beginning of something great. I promise next time, hopefully I have a guest, but regardless, you can expect a great story and a great conversation. And as we wrap up, I want you to think of someone whose story you may not fully know. I want you to start thinking about those better questions to ask, and I want you to be more curious. This is only the beginning. I hope that Everyday Lives, Passionate People becomes a space where we slow down and ask better questions. And remember that everyone has a story that's worth hearing. Thank you again for tuning in today. I'm really excited for this journey. Go out, be more curious, and make today your masterpiece. See you guys next time. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Everyday Lives, Passionate People. This podcast is built on one belief: everyday people carry powerful stories. If you know someone whose story, passion, or journey deserves to be heard, send them this episode. Frankly, I would love to have a lot more people with great stories on the show. Follow along for more conversations about life, passion, purpose, struggle, and growth. I'm Dante Patterson, and until next time, remember this: ordinary lives can hold extraordinary lessons.